Her phone pinged at a grave with her name. The notification bloomed on her screen the moment her shoes left the gravel and slid onto the soft path between moss-dark stones. A small bell chime, bright as glass. A banner at the top. "You have arrived, Edeni Hale." The words sat there as calmly as a weather app, as if the city had decided to label her the way it labels a bridge or a square. The place was Bonaventure Cemetery in Savannah, Georgia. Spanish moss hung in long, steady sentences from the live oaks. The river kept its secrets behind the bluff and breathed like a sleeping room. It was late afternoon on a Sunday in early November, the air cool enough to make her wish for sleeves and warm enough to forgive her for forgetting them. Before we begin, tell me, where are you listening from and what time is it there? Her name was Edeni Hale, 28. She worked in visitor services at a small maritime museum upriver, the kind of job that made her memorize the angles of ships and the dates when storms came ashore. She liked fonts and quiet, and the sound salt makes drying on stone. She was visiting Bonaventure because her friend Anson had flown in from Minneapolis for a long weekend, and the two of them liked places that let you feel your breath in your mouth. The year was 2021. Phones knew where you were within decent intimacy. Some headstones wore small plaques with codes that asked to be scanned and promised a story. They had parked on Bonaventure Road under an oak that had learned to be older than most houses. The sky was simple, a clean coin of light. The volunteer at the office had given them a paper map and a soft-voiced list of locations worth the walk if you wanted your day to hold. Look for the little angels facing east. Find the section where the camellias keep blooming against instruction. There's a family plot that feels like a room you shouldn't step into without knocking. No one mentioned a notification. Edeni stared at her phone. The banner did not give a location like Section F or Plot 31. It was the same tag her calendar used when she arrived at work or home. "You have arrived, Edeni Hale." As if she were a place. As if the grave were her. Anson leaned toward the screen and squinted. He was tall and light-footed, a teacher of high school literature who carried poems in his pockets like receipts. He read the banner and then her face and made a small arranging motion with his hands, the way he does when he wants to place humor where fright is trying to sit. "That's a bug," he said, not unkindly. "Or a geofence you made and forgot. Did you tell your phone to remind you to be yourself today?" She clicked the banner to see where the phone thought she belonged. A map opened, a blue dot pulsed with the steady patience of a small heartbeat. A gray pin sat 100 feet east in a section labeled McAllister. The pop-up bubble above the pin read Edeni Hale in the same unsentimental font. She did not have a virtual contact called a cemetery. She had not created a reminder to arrive at her own name. The phone had decided the path curled between stones with dates that made you speak them out loud, because numbers are easier to hold when they come through the mouth. 1873, 1920, 2009. The Oaks leaned as if sold on the idea that the living need rehearsal space. Anson spoke a tour fact about a poet who loved this place and whose plaque visitors touch in a small, quick superstition. Edeni nodded because liking facts is a way of staying steady. Her pocket shook again. Another chime, the same banner. "You have arrived, Edeni Hale." She breathed the way the yoga teacher on the internet tells you to. In through a count of 4, hold for 4, out for 6. They followed the path east until the bluff opened its shoulder and let the wind test their sleeves. The section ahead was a little higher, a little more sure of itself. A plot enclosed by low stone, dressed in ivy, sat beneath a live oak that looked like a table that had decided to grow legs. In the center stood a headstone gray as rain, taller than Edeni's shoulder. The name at the top held Edeni Hale. She stopped. You might have stopped too. Her name was not common. Her mother had found it in a book of Old English names and liked the way it sounded like a promise made under a tree. She had never met another Edeni. To see the letters in this order on stone felt like stepping into a movie where you have lines you did not audition for. Anson's hand found her elbow without a show of it. He had the sense not to say, "Wow," or "Are you kidding?" He stood with her and let the river finish a sentence neither of them had started. The dates carved below the name were the first clean relief, 1974 to 2014, not hers. A woman 2 decades older, gone 7 years now. Under the dates, a line that read as Keeper of the Keys. The stone carried a small oval of glazed photo, a face with hair tucked back, eyes steady, a glint of a keyring at the edge of the frame. The oval was rubbed to a shine from fingers, the way love polishes small things while refusing to say it is love. On the right-hand corner of the stone, someone had bolted one of the new plaques with its little square of patterns. Scan to learn more. People who love story cannot resist a square that holds one. Idani lifted her phone and let the camera see. A link opened without asking for anything. A page built by a memorial service company bloomed. At the top, the name again. Below, a small biography. A life lived with habits, upright and kind. A childhood in Chatham County, a long run as cemetery sexton. The last line read in a voice that felt like a woman sitting on a step with a mug and a warning and a grin. If you need something, tell the ground. It will tell me. While she read, the phone hummed again. Not a banner this time. A little circle pulsing at the top of the screen, the way maps announce a place with enthusiasm. The circle flashed once, then settled. Idani swiped down to see the source, a calendar reminder with no category. White, titled simply, Arrived. Location, here. She had not written that. The phone, perhaps, had decided the day needed a label, or the small plaque had more to it than the page admitted. Anson said the woman in the photo had librarian eyes. He meant that as a compliment. He pointed at the keyring. He said his grandmother had been a keeper of the keys at a church in North Dakota, and those women know where every grief sits at every hour, the way a night janitor knows which chairs spit gum and which ones sigh. They stood a while. People walked past in respectful silence, guided by a docent's voice that held just enough theater to keep 15 people from wandering into their own daydreams. Spanish moss moved like thought repeating itself. A flake of light rose off the river and fell back as if it had changed its mind about being air. It would have been a good story already finding your own name on stone, a phone that had the audacity to tell you you had arrived, but something else decided to be true. A little tone sounded from the phone, the way sounds do when an app you forgot you had decides to help. It was the noise her AirDrop made when someone nearby wanted to share a photo at inopportune moments. The screen shifted to a dialogue. A file offered to send itself to her. The sender name was a string of letters and numbers that meant nothing. The file name read Keys. Anson leaned in and made his face calm. Decline, he said gently, because strangers in public places with quick hands make tricks, and both of them work in museums and have seen every version of the human habit of testing boundaries. She hovered. Decline would be wise. Accept would be a dare. She pressed accept because sometimes you let stories finish what they start. The file downloaded. It was not a photo, it was an audio file, a minute 42 in length. The waveform showed it wasn't silence. She tilted the phone toward her own ear instead of speaker, because you don't open a voice in a cemetery loud unless the voice has earned the right. Static first, then the sound of wind combing something thin, then a woman's voice, the age of a woman, who tells tools where they belong and expects cooperation. The voice said, dry as a towel and warm as a summer kitchen. If you are standing over me, child, and your name is mine, you can help me keep my promises. Put your phone on the stone and leave it be a minute. It will tell you where to stand next. Anson's eyebrows did a small jazz riff and then tried to behave. Okay, he said softly, a word that meant, I am here and I am not going to ruin this with cleverness. Idani set the phone on the flat top of the headstone the way the voice had instructed. The screen slid into its lock. Her reflection replaced her. The oval photo looked past her shoulder the way old photos always do. She counted in her head as a way to keep the childish fear of being tricked from standing up and knocking the ritual with its elbow. 50, 60, 78. The phone buzzed once, she lifted it. The map opened of its own accord. The blue dot had moved nothing. The gray pin had changed. It labeled another grave 30 yards north with a name neither of them had seen on the paper map. Rosin Hale. A second name. Another Hale. The first name was Welsh and not common here. They went because the day had asked enough times to be answered polite. The second stone stood lower, more modest. The granite, a color you could never find on purpose if you looked in a catalog. The dates were older, 1931 to 1999. The epitaph read, "She kept the gate lighted," and under that, in smaller letters, so faint you could only see them when the cloud put its hand over the sun, a line, Rosine was born. Rosine Idris. She married into Hale and stayed. Tell my niece if she comes through here that I see her when I count keys. I am not anybody's niece, Idini said aloud, and then took a breath because she heard the defensiveness squirreled underneath. I mean, not hers. You might be more people's niece than you know, Anson said gently, a man who had grown up with uncles who weren't uncles and yet were more family than the kind that wears your face. They stood while the wind added a signature to the bottom of the page of the day. The river put its shoulder against the bank and leaned. The phone did not ping again for a while. A cardinal went from one branch to another with the purposeful speed of a person who knows where the parts are stored. A group of teenagers trailed an auntie through the lanes, popping gum in a respectful way, which is a regional miracle. Idani looked up Rosen on the cemetery's database because when your heart gets odd, facts make a braid to hold on to. The database was one of those volunteer-built websites that carry the tone of a potluck where everyone brings a dish so exact it shames you for choosing salad. Rosen's entry was thorough. Born Rhonda Valley, came across with parents as a child, settled in Chatham County, married one Mr. Hale, worked checklist after checklist for the electrical union office, sang alto in church with the patience of an anvil, survived by no children, preceded by older brothers, all gone. Niece mentioned in an obituary in 1999 with no name given. Anson made a sound that meant the story had wiped its hands on his shirt and was ready to cook. The phone chimed once more, now with the tone her museum app uses when a beacon in an exhibit hands you a fact. She had turned beacons off last month because being interrupted by history while in history felt a bit like a stage whisper in a quiet theater. She had not turned beacons back on. The screen read, "A note is waiting." A map pinpointed the little brick building the cemetery uses as a workshop for the grounds crew. A path drew itself in blue between the Hales and the shop, like a string in a child's game. They went because keys that ask to be found deserve not to rust. The door to the shop was propped with a cinder block the way doors are propped everywhere when the weather learns to be useful. A radio played a station that chose Old Soul and occasional baseball score updates. No one was at the counter. A bell stood there anyway, the kind that rings a sound like a glass penny. Anson rang it because he likes participating in obvious rituals. A man in his 50s with a badge that read August came in from the back, wiping his hands on a rag that had earned its keep. "You folks need a map," he asked, then took a longer look at their faces and revised. "Or a minute." "We were by the Hale Stones," Idani said, and watched the way a man looks when a rhyme finds his ear and tells him it cares. August nodded. "Course you were," he said. "I keep an envelope for that family. Been waiting on who it's waiting on." He reached under the counter, where drawers have learned to hold what should not be lost, and brought up a large yellow envelope with a blue paperclip that had rusted a little by choosing weather. The envelope had 3 words on the front in tidy block letters. For the next Idani, heat went across her face like an honest light. August saw it and stilled. He handed her the envelope the way people hand one another babies, meaning well and moving slow. She opened it with her thumb. Inside, 3 items. A small brass key, old, not ornate, with teeth filed like a decision. A folded sheet torn from a spiral notebook, edges soft with years. And a wallet-sized photo of a woman in a blue work shirt with a name patch and a grin you could feel on your back like afternoon Sunday. The patch read, "I Donny." The face belonged to the woman on the first stone. The note was written in blue ballpoint in a hand that pressed harder than paper deserves. It read, simple. "For the next Idani in this county who can hear me the way a key hears a lock." My niece is out there. She won't say yes to the word niece because words are stubborn. She'll need to open the box in the old mausoleum we keep for tools and favors. The key is for the small door on the left. Lift on the latch while you turn. The box has what belongs to her and me and her grandmother. If she is standing at my stone with a phone, she will know that I know. Don't bring a crowd. Bring one friend who reads instructions with his eyes. Leave the key when you are done. We can count without hands here. I'm not someone's niece, she said again, and heard how the sentence grew less certain with practice. Her mother's family tree began and ended in a different state. A line of women who told polite lies to spare one another the sharp edges and did their grief in broom closets. Her father had not survived long enough to name distant relations. He had left behind a bent screwdriver and a smell that her body still could find when a day asked. Anson's hand found the counter in a quick pat, like checking for keys as you leave the house. You don't have to be a niece to be the person meant to do a thing, he said. But also you might, and it might not matter how that happened. August tapped the counter twice, a habit that sounded like a yes. The small left door, he said. People never see it. Take the path behind the office and go right at the angel with the missing hand. The mausoleum is the little brick one that looks polite. The left door sticks the way a lie sticks to a room. Do what the note said, lift and turn. They went back into the light. The blue string on the map did not bother now to draw. The path knew their feet. The angel with the missing hand stood where the volunteer had said, "Angels stand, face east," blank expression that suggested she had witnessed every century and found nothing quite bad enough to frown at yet. The brick mausoleum waited with that small pride buildings have when they know they are not the grandest on the block, but are the one that does the job without complaint. The left door looked like a panel added later. The brass latch had the smoothness that comes of being touched by people who mean to get work done. Idani slid the key in, the teeth caught, and then thought better of it. She lifted the latch with her other hand and turned. The lock gave. The door opened 6 inches and stopped, ticked by a wooden wedge that had been insinuated at the bottom by someone who had not wanted the door opened by accident or habit. Anson reached down and pulled the wedge free. It had a date burned into it with a soldering iron. 2014. The year on the first stone. Inside was a closet of sorts, pegboards and hooks, a rake missing its second tooth, a coil of twine that had memorized its circle and would not learn a new trick, and on a shelf at eye level, a tin bread box with a domed lid, painted a green faded to the color of river glass. No lock. Written in the same blue hand on a piece of tape was a word: hail. She lifted the lid like a person lifts lids on boxes that might contain bees or inheritance. Inside, arranged with the blunt care of someone who never made a mess unless a branch fell where it shouldn't, sat 3 items: a narrow ledger with a black cloth spine, a key fob with 3 small brass tags stamped with numbers, and a folded paper bag, the kind grocery stores use for baking flour, rolled tight and rubber banded with an elasticity that made its own sound. She opened the ledger first because pages are her map. Names, rows of them, dates, locations in the cemetery with check marks where gates had failed and been repaired. Next to some entries, a small star. Those starred names also appeared on the little brass tags. Numbers, not random, not plot numbers, locker numbers. The cemetery kept a bank of lockers for the grounds crew in a shed she had not thought needed one. Her phone chimed in her pocket, a small suggestion from the maps. Direction nudged, left, then right. Then, would you like to add this location to favorites? She ignored the phone. The ledger asked for attention. On the inside back cover of the ledger, a note in different handwriting. Spare for Rosen's niece if she finds it. Locker 12 holds what isn't in the ground. If days are bad, tell the river. The river tells me. The tags on the key fob read 10, 12, 14. She ran her finger over 12 the way a person does over a scar. She felt nothing supernatural. She felt focus. Anson took the bag at her nod and unwound the rubber band. Inside lay 2 objects wrapped in butcher paper. He unrolled the first. A locket. Gold. Thin as luck. with a hairline crack, shaped like lightning, if lightning were careful. Inside, a photograph so tiny it could be breathed away if you weren't paying mind. A baby in a christening gown that had borrowed lace from a curtain, the face pinched in the way newborn faces pinch. On the back, in pencil that had migrated into the paper like a crop planting itself, a name, Rosin Idris Hale. A line below it, for my niece to hold if she comes to hear me. He unrolled the second, a county map from 1968, creased, the paper's fiber gone feathery at the folds. A road circled in blue pencil, a margin note. That old step bridge out by the waterworks. We left something in the middle beam in 74. If you can't find it, it means we didn't need it. If you can, well, you'll know. We are not going to a step bridge at dusk, Anson said, a man who loved old maps and also loved not getting in the paper under the wrong kind of headline. We are going to find Locker 12 while the Museum of the Dead is still on our side. They found the shed. August had seen their faces through the glass and met them halfway with the keys because some stories ask for a witness who knows better than to narrate. He led them to a wall of small metal lockers, each door painted the dull red of a barn that had not given up but had learned to pace itself. He unlocked 12 and stepped back. Inside lay a small stack of shallow boxes, each labeled with a date. The top was the 1, 2014. Under that, 2008. Under that, 1999. Anson lifted the top box and set it on a workbench. He opened it with care. Inside, wrapped in tissue that had become more suggestion than paper, sat a handful of objects that people keep for reasons the living should not pretend to understand quickly. A church key. A photo of 3 women, arms crossed, outside a union hall, one of them with a name patch that read R. Hale, a Polaroid of a red step bridge with water under it purling toward a bend. A handwritten note folded small. The note read, "For the niece who knows the word niece because keys hum when they find their door. You were not an accident. We kept count. We named you all the ways we could. Our names were soft and stubborn. Take what you want, leave the ledger so the ground does not have to work alone." She sat because standing felt rude. She is a woman whose mother did not tell stories with this kind of curve. She gathered the truth like thread. Her mother had been born in this county and left when she was 19, a bus to another state, a man met in a grocery line, a child years later when the idea of staying had become heavy. She did not talk about siblings, claimed not to remember cousins, flinched when the phrase back home came up. The name Hale had come not from romance, but from accident or choice, a name taken because other names insisted on being something else. Rosin Idris had married into Hale, but the family had been built long before that. Keys had been passed with and without rings. August stood with a posture that says, "I will not take your moment away from you." When the radio in the shed shifted to a weather update, he reached and turned it down so the forecast would not interrupt a storm already occurring. Anson put his hand flat on the bench and counted to 8 for no reason his body would confess. "Tell me if you want me not to read the other notes," he said. The kind of friend a person needs in rooms where both mystery and bureaucracy show up at the same table. "Read," she said. "We're already here." The note in the 1999 box was from Rosin and felt like laughter on a porch when the pots are already washed. "The house we put ourselves in is not one the county believes holds blood," she wrote. "But it holds me. And it holds the keys. If you need a name, the river has one. If you need a door, the shed does." In the box from 2008, a different hand, shakier, it read, "I kept the lights in the gate, all through the storms. I think sometimes we are simply the people who keep lights. If you are mine, you will know when to turn one on." In the box from 2014 was a letter from the sexton whose face smiled off the oval on the stone. She wrote like a woman who had lived by the kind of lists that get family through winter. "I have no children of my own except the Gates," she wrote, "but I have a niece whether the paper says it or not. I kept her not by being in the room, but by owning my stubbornness. If she stands over me with a phone and hears me, she will take what she needs and leave what she should, and I will go on counting with my hands in dirt like I like to do." They left the boxes as they'd found them, shifted nothing but air. August closed the locker with a satisfaction that felt like lining up the edges on a stack of bills and smoothing them down. He did not ask for anyone's story. He had one of his own, built of this place, and the line of names he keeps with the quiet grace of a man who waters plants. By the time they stepped back into the paths, the light had hunched into evening. The river sounded less like sheet music and more like a phrase repeating. The map on her phone had stopped suggesting anything and gone back to pretending it was an obedient device. The air smelled like river, camellia, and a penny someone had worried in a good pocket for a decade. Anson asked if she wanted to go to the step bridge. She said no, in a voice that held both sorrow and a plan. Tomorrow, in daylight, when names sit on surfaces more politely. He agreed because this is what friendship is, a committee about timing. That night, she sat at her kitchen table with the ledger borrowed under August's nod and the locket under her thumb. She called her mother. The call rolled twice, and then the voice she knew and loved and sometimes resented filled the line with wind and caution. They made small talk for 30 seconds, and then they moved somewhere they had not walked together. "Ma," she said, "who was Rosen? Who was Idony before me?" Silence, sincere. A kettle somewhere in the house. The refrigerator willing itself to be steady. Finally, her mother sighed, and the sigh sounded like a drawer allowed to close after being held open too many years. "My aunt," she said, "not by blood, by the kind of line people draw when the law does not help. She and the other one, the sexton, kept me safe when I was little and didn't know that my father wasn't safe to be around. They ran the lights in the cemetery and in the loose latch doors and told me when to lock things and when to open them. They were more my aunts than any of the few relatives that share me. When I left everything. I thought that was how you survive. I have not told you the parts you asked me about because I thought you'd want something tidier than I had, and because I am silly enough to think if I did not say the names, the ache would go to sleep." She told a story of a girl who sat on a stoop counting keys while two women kept a town's small doors in working order, literal and figurative. She told how those women had taught her to move through rooms with respect and to leave envelopes where they'd be needed. She did not speak tenderly about the man who invented the silence she had carried. She spoke tenderly about the other men, the ones who changed locks without asking why, and taught a child where the ladders were kept for days when rain insisted. "I should have told you," her mother said finally, soft with the fatigue of a woman who has not confessed a simple truth for a long time. "You have two names, the one I gave you and the one the other women left for you to find when you were ready. You belong to both. You belong to yourself most." They went to the step bridge the next day. It was out by the old waterworks, just as the margin note had said. The county had let weeds try to become the principal of the place, and the weeds had accepted the assignment with poor posture and pride. The bridge stood, red paint scabbed into beauty, water under it moving with the impatient streams have when the river bullies them with schedule. In the middle beam, behind a square of metal the size of a book, a hollowed space. Inside, wrapped in waxed paper, a ring of keys on a chain that had learned 3 hands. Each key had a number: 10, 12, 14. The fob matched the tags in the box. Beside the keys lay a square of paper with a tiny handprint in paint the color of that old camellia behind the office. A child had been here once. She had pressed her hand down. Someone had saved it for a woman who would put her hand down later and understand they did not take the keys. She set her palm over the handprint. The sizes did not match. The feeling did. She closed the plate. She and Anson walked back to the car with the sun finding their shoulders and the hum of insects writing their own accurate dissertations on persistence. Back at the cemetery, she returned the ledger. August nodded like a man at the end of a good piece of work. She walked to the first stone and put 2 fingers on the glazed oval where the sexton's face had learned to look past tourists to the river. She did not speak. She let the ground and the river carry whatever needed moving. Her phone did not ping again there. It would ping months later, once in a grocery store aisle in a different city, when an older woman in a Union jacket looked at her and tilted her head in a way that meant keys are a language. It would ping once again when she held the hand of a friend through a night much too long and heard as clearly as weather a voice say, "Lift and turn." It would ping at odd hours for the next several years when doors asked to be locked or opened with care. Sometimes it would be an app acting like a person, sometimes it would be a person acting like a map, sometimes it would be a name arriving in a room with good manners and old roots. If you want the tidy ending, it is this. She wrote to the memorial company to ask who had access to the airdrop at the stone. No one answered in a way that satisfied anyone who cares about permissions. She kept the photo of the sexton in her wallet behind the museum badge and found that having a face like that near your ID keeps you from forgetting where the door to the stairwell is in a fire. She learned to count gates with her hands, the way women in that county had since the first lock learned the first habit. She took pies to August's workbench and listened to his stories. She phoned her mother on Sundays and let the conversation go long enough to find the sentence that mattered each week. She carried with her the sentence from the Oval's page. If you need something, tell the ground. It will tell me. If you want the less tidy truth, it is this. Sometimes your life is a geofence you didn't set. Sometimes you arrive at your own name carved in stone, and the stone says, "Welcome." Sometimes you are the niece of women who bent keys into new jobs and called that bending prayer. Sometimes your phone pings at a grave, and the ping is only a device doing what it was taught, and sometimes it is a noise a river makes when it is trying to talk through everyone's machines at once. If this happens to you, if you walk under trees that have learned the art of holding up clouds, and a little bell sounds in your pocket, and your name appears as a place, don't panic. Stand where you are. Read the dates out loud so the year will stop pretending it is only a number. Touch the stone with 2 fingers, not more. Listen for the voice that sounds like someone who knows where the ladders are kept. If a key is offered, lift and turn. If a door sticks, lift and turn. If a person asks for a niece, say the word niece like a new tool you know how to use. And when you leave, take the long path that wanders near the bluff. The river will be there keeping count. The oaks will be there practicing their patient grammar. Your phone will settle back into behaving. The ground will remember you, not because you are special, but because that is what ground does for people who treat it like a partner. Somewhere behind you, a bell on a worker's desk will ring, and a man named August will nod to no one and say out loud into an empty shed, "She arrived." Then he will sweep the floor in slow, exact strokes as if he were writing the names in dust and erasing them on purpose so the day could begin again and mean it. The road that GPS refuses to map, locals avoid it. They call it Limestone Cut on county maps, but no map app will take you there. Not in daylight, not at 3 in the morning, not even if you stand at the mouth of the lane with full bars and beg your phone like a superstitious traveler. The line of asphalt slips off Route 27 near the Ohio River, just past a caved-in orchard and a billboard for a roadside Jesus that no longer stands. In person, the turn is ordinary. On a screen, it is missing, as if the road and the world had decided to keep a small secret between them. Before we begin, tell me where are you listening from and what time is it there? This is in southeastern Ohio, down in Gallia County, where the hills go soft and the river carries towboats like patient thoughts. The year was 2022, late September. Goldenrod along the guardrails. Soybean fields gone the color of toast. I drove there on a Friday after work because a listener named Thayer Lorne had written to me with a subject line that felt like a dare. The road your GPS refuses to map. Locals avoid it. Please come before the county pours gravel again. Thayer was not a crank. She taught 2nd grade in a brick school with a playground that leaned into a sycamore's shade. She coached a Lego league. She used the word prudent in a way that made you want to be. Her email listed dates and names the way people list ingredients. 2 wrecks in 2 years, 1 missing signage, 1 strange call to the sheriff's office just after midnight in late June. She did not say haunted, she said wrong. I left Columbus at 4:30 with a thermos of coffee and a box of gas station crackers and the kind of optimism you only get on a 2-lane infall. South on 23, east on 35. The sun slung low behind me, the way good music hides its effort. By 7:15, I rolled past Vinton's courthouse with its white clock face turning the hour into a suggestion. I kept the radio quiet. In the passenger seat, the county plat book rode buckled like a fussy child. I could feel the river before I could see it, the way the air saturated and the smell of damp earth put its hand on your shoulder. I reached the turn at dusk. Limestone Cut was marked by a county sign that had once been green and was now a speculation. A locked gate blocked a gravel spur to the right, but the paved lane went on unbothered, as if all gates were for other people. My phone sat in the cup holder, showing me nothing. The blue line ended in a gray shrug. I tried 3 apps. Same shrug. The plat book said the road existed, had always existed, and ran 2 miles east to a decommissioned ferry landing that had not seen a ferry since 1978. The app said, find another way. Thayer's warning lived in my pocket. Locals avoid it after dark. They say it runs warm. They say it has more turns than it used to. They say tires squeal on dry asphalt without your foot agreeing. The first 100 yards were ordinary. Willow and ash. An old fence stapled to posts that leaned like tired men at a bus stop. The air smelled faintly of limestone and wet leaves. Then the temperature did a small, undeniable thing. It rose. Not a gust, not a patch of sun through trees, a steady, even climb that lapped over my forearms and stayed. I glanced at the dash. Outside temp read 64, rising to 68, then 71. The date on the dash glowed September 23rd. The time said 7:47 and slipped to 7:50 without being asked. I lowered the window to let the river air in. The warm beat met the cool and negotiated a truce that left sweat at my hairline. A bend. Another. The road narrowed until it felt like a confession. The trees grew close enough to see where vines had taught them to bow. I rolled slower. A small bridge came into view, wood deck, steel truss. A sign nailed to a poplar announced one lane in letters that had been painted by someone who believed in understatements. Beyond the bridge, the road ripple curved through a cut so tight the rock faces wore each other's dust. I stopped before the bridge, because I am not brave so much as careful. I set the hazard lights flashing red into green. I listened. A train whispered somewhere upriver. Crickets laid a steady carpet of sound over everything. From the cut, a thin metallic note like cooling machinery. The warm air possessed a sweetness I could not name immediately. Jams and canning season came to mind. Then the word arrived. Apples. Not Honeycrisp and not cider. Fallen apples. Ferment thinking about becoming something else. I took my notebook and recorded the details the way you do when you want the future to trust your memory. Time, temperature, smell, no wind, no other cars. Then I drove across the planks and felt the boards answer the tires like a breath under my feet. The cut rose. The hill pressed close. A corner went tighter than it looked on the approach. My rear tires slid a fraction, not enough to call it a slide, enough to make my throat say a quiet word I would not put in print. The steering wheel thudded softly, as if there were 2 wheels telling me 2 slightly different stories about straight. I eased. I took the next bend slower. There is a point in a road where the land decides whether you are a guest or a problem. Limestone Cut decided I was a slow guest and tolerated me. The warm air leveled at 76, then climbed another couple of ticks. The smell of apples deepened into something like a recipe, cinnamon without spice, yeast without bread. I passed a turnout with 2 straight ruts that led into grass and ended at a log older than my car. A shape hung from a branch ahead. I braked. It was a memorial. Cross from cedar rails wired together, silk flowers that had learned to be brave in rain, photos in a sleeve of plastic tacked below a name printed on glossy paper. Mireille Pasque, 19, a date in October 2020. Below it, a line her father must have chosen, the road that brought you home. I got out. The heat met me like a body. My phone tried to show me bars, then tried not to. A moth hit the hazard light and changed its mind. I stood with my hands in my pockets and felt the place balance itself on me. When I turned across the road, I noticed another set of flowers half hidden in blackberry cane. The name blew up at me when wind finally remembered how. Osric Vales, 21, May 2021. Same line. The road that brought you home. I walked farther along the cut until it opened like a sigh. The lane flattened to a seam along a scrim of meadow that used to be something else. You can tell by how grass lies. If it grows with a memory of rose, something stood there before. The sky went the color of a bruise, deciding between night and purple. A light flickered ahead, low and steady. I squinted. Not a house, not a car, a lantern, rope handle, old-fashioned glass with its bubbles catching the last light. It swung at the mouth of a driveway, if driveway is what you call two parallel lines of dirt that remember wagons. A woman stood a few feet back from it in a denim coat and boots that had done more than look good. She raised a hand. Not a stop, exactly. A hello shaped by caution. You are going the wrong way, she said. Her voice had small-town plainness and age that could have been anywhere between 35 and 55 because work makes a music of people that is hard to date. She nodded to my car. Turn around at the lane. There is no place to swing up ahead. It goes to water and then to nothing, and the bank will be slick after last night. I introduced myself. I said my name and the name of my show. Her face did not change. She untied the rope from a dogwood sapling and brought the lantern closer. The glow put a field of gold on her cheek. You are the radio girl, she said, not unkind. Thayer told me you were coming. She said you are polite. She looked at my tires. I would go back before you go forward. The ferry road has two corners that do not know they are corners, and if you slide there, you will spend the night with your axle thinking about consequences. I asked her name. She said Tamsin Holt. She kept a hand wrapped around the lantern handle, as if light were something you hold to keep it from leaving. She pointed to the bank of the cut where the rock shouldered out above us. Hear that, she said. The rock under here runs with water. Not springs exactly. Leaks from the old drain gallery. The county drilled holes so the slope would get lighter and the holes steam and fall. The air warms, the road sweats. It is not witchcraft. It is a bad idea. We keep pretending we'll dry out. Her lantern threw small moons into the glass of my windows. A flock of nighthawks cut a pattern above the trees. The warmth wrapped the throat more than the skin, which is how you know it belongs to breath or rot. Tamsin tilted her head toward the river. You cannot see it from here, but it sits too close. When the ferry ran, the road came straight to the ramp. They moved the river to suit the men, and the river said, fine, I will move the bank to suit myself. And it has been a conversation since. Why will no app draw it? I asked. She shrugged slowly, as if some questions wore heavy coats. I heard it was a break in the public line after the flood in 2004 when the county closed it to repair the approach and never told the machines they had opened it again. I heard the maps blacklisted the coordinates when a mother drove into the river by following a robot voice that said, continue. I heard a man who knows about things sent an email to a company that said, please leave it off. We are tired of retrieving tourists and their courage. The people who make those clouds of roads do not live here. They live inside a different weather. Her hand flicked lightly at the memorial. Myre was my niece. Osric was her friend. They swung through here in a rain they thought would stay light. One slid, then the other came to help and turned around on land that looked like land and was not. The bank changes in a storm. The river is a liar that tells the truth when it feels like it. We stood with our feet on a road that wanted to be water. Time thinned. The lantern made a small island. Crickets sang as if the night were not worried about us at all. Thayer told me, locals avoid it, I said. Tamsin laughed once, a dry wire of a laugh that had carried heavier things. Locals avoid it when they are smart. Some are not smart all the time. Sometimes I am not. Sometimes I stand at the ferry mark and listen to the buckles tick when the night cools them and tell my mother out loud that it is time to put the kettle on. She died 2 winters ago, and still I tell her, she put 50 years into this hill. The hill speaks her name when the wind is slow. You will make a story and it will be tidy, and the road will keep doing what it has done since horses learned to trust it. It will take what you said on it if you hurry. I asked if I might walk to the landing with her. She considered my shoes and the angle of the hill and the slick of wet in the lantern's light. She nodded once. We left the car with hazard lights, confessing my bad choice to whoever came next. We walked with the lantern and our breath and the warm in our faces until the dark gave us what it was holding. A low lip of concrete with bolts that had once held a chain, a post with rings that had carried ropes heavy with river. The river itself turned its blank face up and said nothing. Across the water, three lights ran tin-tin along a ridge. Behind us, the hill kept its gravity like a rule book. Tamsin set the lantern on the ramp and crouched. "See here." She pointed with a patience that came from knowing a place by its mischief. The asphalt meets the pour with no shelf. In summer, fine. In rain, gone. The silt builds a veneer. Your tire thinks it is road, your foot thinks it is time to turn, then you are signing a form you do not remember. She stood, the lantern painting the underside of her chin. You will want to say the road is cursed. It is not. It is low. There is a difference. Low places keep things. Heat, fog, news. People's stories when they cannot carry them anymore. This one keeps a kind of warmth that does not belong to weather. It comes from the hill and the old galleries drilled in 1952 when the county had money from a federal thing and men believed rock would behave. Rock behaves like a teenager with a kind heart. It tries until it does not. We walked back, not slow and not fast. The road felt different even in the short space between the landing and the cut. In the notebook of my body, I wrote a line I could not read until later. The turns here remember another set of hands on the wheel. I had the sense, foolish but insistent, that there are more curves than there used to be, and that the road will add one for anyone who comes distracted. At the car, Tamsin lifted the lantern again and said the thing I had not wanted to hear because it was the only thing that mattered. Do not publish the directions. If a person knows, they know, and they approach with respect. If they do not, their phone will talk them out of it and we will save work. Write about the heat. Write about the girls who keep silk flowers alive in rain. Write about how the river and the county have a conversation. In October, no one else gets to hear. But do not draw a map for the kind of curiosity that leaves us with Sunday morning calls. I promised her. I meant it. She nodded, then lifted the lantern to her face and blew gently so the flame leaned and stood again. Then she said the softer thing that made me like her. If you need to end your story, end it with a sentence that knows how to sit down. The road is still here without your sentence. I will walk it tomorrow with my sister and tell her about the way our mother scolded mud. That will be the end that matters. We said goodnight the way people say it when they know they will see each other in a grocery aisle soon enough. I turned the car in a careful crescent and returned over the bridge that knocked the tires politely 3 times. At the first straight stretch, I stopped and turned off the engine and the lights and sat in the dark, letting the warm air forget me. The smell of apples and limestone and old rain moved through the open window like a slow parade. Far off, a coyote made a cracked sound and then decided not to continue. I wrote in the notebook by the dash light. 8:54. 75 degrees, crickets, no wind, one moth, determined. On the way back to Route 27, a truck came around the curve with someone from here at the wheel. He lifted 2 fingers from the top of the wheel in that rural benediction, eyes steady. I answered in kind. We passed without incident. My phone found a signal and rushed to tell me things I did not need. I turned it face down. The river kept its counsel. I stayed at a motel with a door that opened to the parking lot and a shower that sprayed like a hose with a grudge. At 11, I lay on the bed and listened to the highway need the night. I dreamed a dream that did not need translation. I drove the road in June in a rain that put a lid on the world. I felt the turn that did not know it was a turn. I saw silk flowers underwater moving like they were alive. When I woke at 3, the room was hotter than it should have been. I set the thermostat down, it huffed, I opened the door, and the night came in like medicine. In the morning, I met Thayer at a diner with a pie display that could make you forget your name. She wore a sweater with elbows that had done more thinking than most elbows. She brought a paper yard sale sign with a hand-lettered arrow pointing left. She set it on the table next to the sugar caddy as if it were a relative. When the waitress poured coffee, Thayer said we used to put these at the turn because apps would not and people would stop right there in the lane with the river in their trunk. The county asked us not to. Said it increased liability. Now we wave and we hope. You saw Tamsin. I did, I said. She told me not to draw a map. Good, Thayer said. Her mouth set around the word like a decision. I asked about the calls to the sheriff's office. She had copies. Public record after someone redacts the parts that hurt, one at 12:04 a.m. in late June. A voice breathing hard. Can you send someone to the ferry road? I do not know if I am on a road. The operator asked for cross streets that did not exist. A second call at 12:12, same number, a different voice. We got her. We need a tow, not an ambulance. No injuries. No one drinks on a Thursday in this county, not like that. Thayer told me stories that were not mine to take without permission. The woman at the landing had taught Sunday school for a decade and could thread a needle in a moving truck. The boy in the BlackBerry cane had planned to enlist and then to come home. The ferry used to carry school buses and funeral processions, and once, in 1964, a parade float for the county queen when the bridge upriver closed for repairs. The operator had a name like a hymn, Dolan Pike. He took quarters with a smile and never wrote them down, and the county forgave him because he put back the difference out of his pocket at Christmas. At noon, I drove back once more because leaving is easier if you say the goodbye that feels like a choice. The day stood warm, even without the night's peculiar swell. The cut reflected a brightness that made the dashboard look cleaner than it was. I idled by the memorials, rolled down the window, and said the names out loud once each. Myray, Osric. The air did not change. The river kept the same tone of voice. A kingfisher strafed the bank and laughed meanly at an idea it did not respect. At the leveling in the trees, a county crew had set cones. 3 workers stood with a clipboard, a shovel, a rope to measure where the bank thought it should be. One of them wore his safety vest open, and the white undershirt said he had been at it since 7. He pointed at the asphalt and drew an invisible curve in the air, as if to show the piece of road how to round itself properly. Another squatted and peeled brittle weeds from a crack like string cheese. The third looked up when I slowed. He lifted a hand, the rural benediction again. I could not tell if he was welcoming me or telling me to go around. I went around. I kept the tires on the places that saw tires last time. You want a reason a road does not show up on a phone? Choose one. Bureaucracy, liability, a digital map made by a company that is afraid of being named in a lawsuit cannot afford local color. A dataset that drops a line because a county closes a gate for a week, a volunteer editor who got spooked, or the oldest reason, because the people who live there asked, and the people who make maps sometimes listen. Here is the part you can keep if you are the kind of person who needs a rule. If locals avoid a road, do not decide you are immune to their reasons because you are careful. Be careful at the places where land forgets itself. Warm air on a cool night means a stone or a story is breathing, and you should give it room. If a turn looks straighter than it is, it belongs to water or to someone else's memory. If you smell apples on limestone in September where no orchard stands, that is the hill reminding you this was a farm before your car was an idea. I drove away before dark because I had promised. The 2-lane lifted me back toward the highway like a kind hand on a back. The plat book lay open to a page that showed a thin gray line stopping shy of the river. I did not pencil it in. Some lines stay honest by remaining incomplete. Months later, when the episode aired, people wrote to tell me about roads in their own counties that maps pretend not to know. A road in Vermont that snowplows leave until last and hikers take in June only. A road in East Texas that turned to soap in rain and led to a bridge a paper mill had once owned. A road in western Pennsylvania that slid a few inches each season until the houses leaned into one another like a wedding party after the toast. None of them wanted directions. Most wanted me to say out loud the thing they already believed. A map is a promise made by someone who cannot know your exact night. I went back in winter. The river carried skim ice, and the air had lost interest in warmth. Limestone cut breathed only rock, careful and slow. The memorials wore new ribbons that made color out of gray. Tamsin's lantern hung from a nail in her shed, unlit but ready. I parked on the turnout and watched for a long minute. No cars, no lights. Only the slow heave of a place that will outlast the names you put on it. If you ever find yourself at a turn your phone refuses to bless, do this. Put the device in the glove box, roll down your window, call the place by the names you were given by people who have rinsed dishes there. Listen for a warmth that belongs to stone or rot or story. Ask if you are a guest or a problem. If the answer takes too long, turn around, go home. Let someone else keep the road for you until you've earned it. Limestone Cut still runs from 27 to the water. Mireille and Osric still own two small pieces of shoulder where silk flowers learn new weather. The ferry still waits in the old bolts when fog pulls the river toward the bank. The apps still refuse, which feels like respect finally performing something like wisdom. The locals still avoid it after dark, and you can call that superstition if you want. I call it the way people learn to live, with a story that does not need their approval to keep going. Wherever you are, whichever hour you gave to this, hear this as you put the kettle on or slip your keys into a dish. A road can be true and not be for you tonight. Let that be a comfort and not an insult. The land does not need your footsteps or your tires to remember its lines. It is enough to name the warmth, bow to it the way you might bow to a neighbor, and step back into the lit part of the map where your house pours light through a window like a square of mercy. The 911 call that kept connecting after the funeral. They buried the phone with him because his mother asked them to. It had been his tool and his diary, the way people keep their whole lives in their pocket now. And in the week between the collision and the service, she said quietly at the kitchen table that she wanted him to have it. The funeral was on a brisk Thursday in late March in a small town along the Skagit River in Washington state, the kind of day that smells like thawed earth and rain on cedar. 2 days later, at 2:18 in the morning, the county's emergency line lit up with his number, and the call connected as cleanly as if he were standing outside the dispatch center with a brand new signal. Before we begin, tell me, where are you listening from and what time is it there? Keely March was the dispatcher on the board that night. 36. A decade of night shifts wrapped around her bones like a habit she didn't try to quit. She knew the sound of every ringtone the county used, and 3 it no longer trusted. She had trained herself to keep breath even if a voice said there is a gun, or the faraway way people say, I think I'm dying. She kept a knitted cardigan on the back of her chair and 2 photos on the shelf above the console. Her mother standing in front of Diablo Lake with her hair trying to fly away, and a Polaroid of a skinny boy with a chipped front tooth and a smile that looked like a dare. The boy was her younger brother, Finn, 28 in the photo, forever 28 by the time the town paper ran his name above the fold. The collision had been a week before spring turned a corner. Late at a 4-way stop out by the county line, an empty log truck rolling too fast through a fog that made taillights smear into red ribbons. Finn drove a dented Civic with a cracked dashboard and an air freshener shaped like a salmon that had long since given up its scent. He worked night stocking feed at the co-op and mornings on his old guitar, composing pieces called things like Wet Pavement and The First Chanterelle. When the deputy knocked on Keely's door just after dawn that Friday, the word sister felt like a ladder that someone had kicked away. They buried him with the phone on a Tuesday afternoon because the ground needed a day after the last hard freeze. Keely held the thing in her palm before they closed the lid. Old, black, the screen spidered, and the case pocked with drops of white paint from the time they redid the kitchen. She turned it face down, as if giving it privacy inside that last small room, and she did not cry in that second. She saved the crying for the night in her car outside the Safeway lot when the radio played a song he used to send her links to, saying, "Listen to the way the kick drum makes the air behave." So when the board flashed with his number at 2:18 in the morning, when the screen read Finn March Mobile, when the console showed the tower on the hill by bird's view, grabbing his call like a father grabs a child's hand crossing a street, there was a half second where Keely didn't breathe at all. Then she did exactly what training says. She pressed the line open, put her voice in the place it knows, and said calmly, 911, what is your emergency? Silence, which is not always empty. The air bedded itself in her ear. She heard distance, a kind of wet rush the river makes when it is thinking about snowmelt. Under that, a click like someone setting a mug on tile. Her eyes went to the automatic location information and found nothing helpful. The software threw up a circle that could have been half the county. The handset beeped as if someone on the other end had put a thumb over the microphone and removed it. Then a sound arrived that she did not mistake, a short, soft, breathy laugh. The exact one a brother makes when he cannot help but find something funny, even in a room where the air belongs to grief. Keely's free hand had already found the little rosary of buttons around enter that she wore down with steady use. Her thumb wanted the panic of someone else. She kept it from that. She tried again. Can you talk to me? If you can't talk, tap once for yes, twice for no. If you are hurt, I need you to stay on the line. We are here with you. A small sound like wind through fur limbs rode the connection, then static, thin as a hair. The call timer hit 19 seconds, 21, 27. She probed the network with a key command. The number at the top of the screen did not lie, it was his. She sent a ping. The triangle on her map twitched half an inch and then flattened, embarrassed to have moved. The night supervisor, a stout woman named MrBall, who kept cough drops in a coffee mug painted with trout, wheeled her chair closer without rolling over Keely's headset cord. You good. It's his, Keely said, and felt foolish because the board already told them both. She tapped a line into the event note. Caller number displays as deceased subject. Open line, faint audio, possible misdeal from unknown handset, possible pocket dial from transferred number. Because the systems need this kind of vocabulary, even when the body wants to type a prayer. The line stayed. The river sound rose and fell with the patience of a thing that had been working since the first melt in these hills. Twice, the click. At 42 seconds, a voice so faint that her headphones might have invented it if she hadn't known the exact way it shaped vowels. A whisper before the word, the way he did when he wanted to speak quietly but his breath didn't know the trick yet. Key, he said. Then static erased whatever came next. She did what you do. You keep the line alive and you start the search without pretending you can command the search's heart. She thumbed a hot button that rang the on-call deputy cruising past Lyman. She opened the text box to the Fire District volunteers and wrote a plain message. Open line 911 from cell belonging to Finn March. Please stage at South Skagit Highway and mile marker 12. Listen for any audible cues. She sent it. She kept her voice in that pocket where calm is a bridge other people can cross. If you can hear me, Finn, give me anything, tap, breath, song, whatever you want. I'm here. I've got you. At 1 minute and 9 seconds, the line disconnected itself with the flat little goodbye that handsets make when they are tired of holding grief. MrBall squeezed Keely's shoulder. Not hard, just where the muscle under the blade flinches when you ask it to admit it's a muscle. Phones glitch, she said. The way you say a thing because you care about the person you are saying it to, not because the sentence is enough. It might be a number that got reassigned too fast. Or a voicemail we don't understand, or the system hiccuping. Eat your granola bar, drink your water. Keely nodded. She typed. She called the carrier and reached a support tech whose voice was young and far away and trying very hard to be the right kind of helpful. He put her on hold while he consulted screens and a script. He came back with words that felt like pebbles. The phone was deactivated the day after the funeral. The SIM wasn't live. The number was in a 30-day limbo before being returned to the pool. No activity on the account, no pings, no nothings. He suggested, gently, that older consoles misreport. She thanked him with the flat politeness you give a person who has done their job thoroughly and still left you in the same room. At 3:31, the line lit again. Same number, same tower, same ring that used to show up when he called from outside the co-op in the rain. She connected. This time, the wind sound was larger, the way a body learns to be a room for weather. She said his name. She said her name, because sometimes that helps even with the living. The whisper arrived again, under a breath that made her think of the cold. Key, he said. Key. What key? Love. Tell me where you are. She could hear MrBall pinging the deputy, already turning him around toward the bridge at Minkler. She messaged the volunteer fire chief, a man named Boone with a mustache that looked like the map of a meandering creek, and he replied with a thumbs up and the single word rolling because that is how nights with radios and riverbanks work. The whisper came a third time. Key, box. Then the line shook itself off like a dog and was gone. At dawn, she drove home the long way because the short way had too many pieces of memory stuck to it. She slept hard for 90 minutes and woke with the imprint of her headset still on her left ear. She showered and went to her mother's, sat at the table with the fruit bowl and the envelope full of sympathy cards that needed more than thanks in reply. She kept the thing she needed to say in her teeth while her mother talked about potato salad and what to do with the clothes in his room. Then she let it out. Simple. His number called, last night, twice. I answered. Her mother's hand did that small pat-pat that says, I hear the pain, but I do not believe the sentence. It's grief, she whispered. It changes the way machines sound. Keely nodded, because there was nothing else to do with that sentence but nod back and put it in a pocket for later. That night, Keely traded shifts so she could be back on at midnight, the board under her hands like a piano that belonged to the county. At 2:16, she said quietly to the room with no one in it but her, don't. And at 2:18, the line lit anyway. The event timer clicked into its 1-2 rhythm. She opened the call. The whisper came faster. Key, box, tread. She wrote the words down in block letters out of a reflex that felt like morality. She pushed her chair back an inch. Tread, she said, like stairs, like a step. A new sound crept in around the edge of the river. A hollow drum, regular, light. Keely closed her eyes. She knew that sound. Years of middle-of-the-night responses to houses with basements and water where it didn't belong. Sump pump, she said out loud, not to the caller, not to the room, just to the fact of sound. She typed, sump, pump, hum. Then another word arrived under the hum, not from the line, but from inside her own head, wearing the voice of the skinny boy in the Polaroid. Take the old key from the coffee can, sis, the one with the brass coin stuck to it. Box under the stair, third tread up, like we did when the lights went out in storms. She stood before she meant to. Maribel watched her, didn't stop her. Keely put the call on a hold that wasn't a hold and told Boone to swing a truck by her mother's house. She called her mother from the desk that sees everything. Don't be afraid, she said. I'm sending the volunteers to check the basement. Just wait for them. Don't go down alone. Her mother didn't ask why, which is one thing grief teaches. People you love get to make requests without explanation for a while. Boone's rig rolled up with its lights quiet. The volunteers went headfirst into that smell. Every Northwest basement owns bleach and wet and the memory of potatoes stored during years when the family didn't trust the store. Keely stayed on the line with the open nothing, her voice splinted into calm by a profession that forbids hysteria. The pump clicked. The whisper breathed once more and said a word she wasn't ready for. Sorry. Then, softly, don't be mad. Boone's voice arrived on the radio like a chair scraping back. Found it, he said, under the third tread. You want me to read you the note, or you want me to bring it to you? Read, she said, because whatever was going to happen to her lungs if she waited wasn't worth the poetry of paper in hand. Boone read slow, the way you read a recipe from a grandmother's hand. It's written on the back of a co-op receipt. It says, key tape to this in case. Safe deposit at Skagit State. There's a note inside for Key. Don't tell Mom what bank it is because she'll go without you. Tell her to wait. Also, okay, sorry about the dent in your bumper. That last part's got a smile face drawn like a potato. Something in Keely that had been standing on one leg for a week put its foot down. She let out a laugh that wasn't a laugh and wasn't anything else her mother would have recognized over the old landline if she'd been listening. She wrote the words down because the act made them legally alive. The line in her ear hissed a little, as if pleased. Then it went quiet. Morning brought a restless sun and the sort of legal tasks people think the dead should have trained us for. She drove her mother to the bank with the safe deposit vault and the ancient pen on a chain. She presented the letter that the funeral director had told her to keep in her purse. They signed a paper. They went into the room with the little booths. The banker slid the box out and put it down like a ceremony. Inside was a small green notebook with his handwriting, which had always leaned like a boy sitting cross-legged on a sidewalk. For Keely, it said on the first page. Next to it, a business envelope with her mother's name. There was a key on a ring shaped like a mountain that belonged to the old Subaru they used to share, and a folded paper that turned out to be a draft of a song he would never record because the bridge wouldn't come no matter how he tricked it. There was also a receipt for a storage unit in town that she'd asked him about once, and he'd shrugged and said tools while his eyes looked at a point behind her shoulder. He had written her a letter that began with two jokes whose laughter had expired, and then got to the part that made her lever open a whole new drawer in herself. "I know you'll be the one who makes sense of this stuff if anything happens," he wrote. "I know I'm not supposed to say if anything happens like I can see it, but I think about it when I'm out by mile 12 in fog and the log trucks don't think they need me to exist." He told her where to find things and how to say certain facts to their mother in a sequence that would hurt less. He wrote a sentence that came from the middle of his lungs. "Don't carry what isn't yours." He signed his name so fast, the last letter looked like a dog's tail. She held the little book while her mother read her envelope. Her mother's face did a new thing, an arrangement Keely hadn't known it could do. She realized, not for the first time, that grief makes a gallery of your expressions, and you have to decide which ones are worth hanging. That night, Keely took herself off the schedule, even though the county hates it when you do that with no notice. She made tea the way their grandmother did, steeped until the spoon stood up if you let it. She sat at the kitchen table with Finn's notebook and a pencil for the words she needed to lay next to his. She wrote the dates like you have to say them out loud, late March, 2021, because numbers felt like bad company. She made a list because doing is a language the body trusts. At 2:18, the phone on the wall rang, the old landline they had kept for storms because cell service sulks here when the rain gets personal. She lifted it with the same hand she used to place IVs when she thought she'd be a nurse. She said hello the way you say hello into a hotel room when you think someone might be in the shower, polite and ready to apologize. "Open line," said the part of her that had trained for too long to rest, but it wasn't the emergency board. It was her mother's cousin from Bellingham, voice carrying prayer under its vowels. Keely felt the absurd laugh again and let it go this time. Not tonight, she thought to the air where a river sometimes lived. The calls went quiet for 3 nights after that. She dreamed the sump pump clonked in a steady heartbeat and that the water rose anyway, inching up the metal pole of the washer like it had a plan. She woke with her mouth dry and her eyes open, the way a serviceable person wakes when she has decided she will not let the day surprise her anymore. On the 4th night, the board lit at 1:10, not 2:18. Same number, same tower, same little pang like someone pulling 3 hairs from the back of her neck in the exact way a brother does when he wants you to feel a thing without associating the pain with him. She answered, now less afraid of the fact and more afraid of the day when the board would decide to stop being strange. This time, it wasn't the river. This time, a sound like tires on aggregate eased into her ear. She heard a blinker make an unnecessary music. She heard a rumble her body recognized as the mile-long freight that climbs the grade toward concrete and can be heard everywhere when clouds lay a lid over the valley. She said his name. The whisper didn't come. Instead, a voice she didn't know. Exhausted in that way dispatchers measure, with a ruler, not with pity. "Ma'am," the voice said, "are you the lady on the other end of this number? This thing called me and it went straight to your board." Keely did a fast thing with her hands that told the recorder to make a second copy. She said her name and her role. The man explained in the way tired men always do, with extra details they do not know are extra. He was a rail worker out past Birdsview, night shift, walking the line with a vest and a can of paint, and a patience that came from a man who had watched 3 friends leave town for no good reason. A phone lying by the ballast lit up bright white as a trout belly and slid a call to 911 before he could decide how to feel. He picked it up because of course he did. He saw the screen read Finn March because whoever the system was had a sense of humor. "Where exactly are you, sir?" she asked. And he told her the truth, the way only people at 2 in the morning tell you truths. Mile marker 11, point something, run outside of the line, by the old alder that looks like a witch if you give her a hat. She sent Boone with 2 men and headlamps and the desire to leave without needing to talk to anyone. They found the phone in a seam of gravel, half covered by ash from last summer's burn, no SIM, no battery, a thing not alive, and still somehow doing the work a thing does when asked correctly. The railman said he had watched a marten cross the tracks with the authority of a bishop, and that the phone had lit at his feet with no reason. Boone brought it back in an evidence bag, as if that would matter to anyone who keeps a room of labeled bags. Keely set the dead phone on the console like a votive. She stared at it 4 minutes and 40 seconds, and then turned it face down the way she had in the chapel with the roses and the smell of lilies that always go too far. She spoke into the radio to tell the volunteers to go home. She put a note in the event record that read in plain human, "Found object belonging to decedent, recovered at tracks near mile 11, turned over to family." The calls didn't stop. They thinned. They arrived on days when the river wore fog like a borrowed coat. They brought her directions she did not always want. It called once when she and her mother were at the storage unit with the overhead door that rolled like a prayer. "Box on the right," said the whisper after the open line, and the pump hum and the small laugh had passed. Not the one with Christmas lights, other right. The box held the watch their grandfather had worn in the war, and 2 rolls of quarters, and the letter that finished a fight their mother had been carrying with a girl from high school for 30 years, without admitting it was heavy. It called once more on an evening in late July, the kind of hot, rare to that valley, when heat lies down like a dog everywhere and pants. She was off duty for once, drinking water in long draws with a slice of lime she did not deserve. The board would be in someone else's ear. Still, she felt it. The old wall phone rang. She lifted it. Nothing. Then the faintest corridor of sound, the way a tin can telephone sounds when the string is too long. She stood very still in her kitchen, in a house that still carries their father's shadow even after 2 decades, and she listened. No river, no pump. Someone whistled 3 notes she hadn't heard since they were kids on a porch with a bowl of cherries and sticky hands. The notes meant, "Come in, it's time." Then the line went as tenderly empty as it had ever been. People ask her sometimes when they find out what happens on the night board, whether she believes in ghosts. She says no in the way a person says no to a question that tries to make a movie out of a documentary. She believes in the way the valley holds sound and the way water teaches machines new tricks. She believes in the habits of grief, which include calling you at unreasonable hours and asking you to find objects on shelves you didn't label. She believes in the way certain names carry weight in certain counties and in the way good men hide keys in obvious places because they want the right person to find them without feeling tricked. If you listen for a moral here, you will miss the point and the point will not be angry. It will go on being a point without you. Keely goes to work, she works. She keeps the cardigan on her chair and the photos on the shelf. She answers calls from people who are alive in the cracked ways the living are alive, and she sends help, and sometimes the help is in time, and sometimes it is in time to witness the end of something. She eats her granola bar. She drinks her water. She drives home the long way if the short way tells a story too loudly. She keeps the dead phone in a drawer that sticks a little on humid days. She tells the story to exactly the right number of people and then stops. Some nights the board does the old trick and shows a number the carrier cannot account for, and a tower that should be asleep, and a location shaped like a shrug. She answers. She says the words she has said more than any words she will ever say. 911. What is your emergency? If all that comes back is a river being a river, she lets the line stay until it learns how to disconnect. If a whisper says key or box or sorry, she says the truth in the voice that has led more people back to themselves than the county will ever know. I've got you. We'll figure it out. When she passes the graveyard on her way to the early shift now and then, she rolls the window down and checks whether the air smells like cut grass and stone or like lilies someone should have watered more recently. She does not say his name out loud there because she knows better. She says it in the car when the freight rolls through the valley and makes the whole county feel like a chest resonating under a singer's hand. She says it in the basement when the pump kicks on and the house remembers last winter. She says it when her mother takes a nap in a chair with sunlight that has fallen asleep with her. And sometimes, when the hills fold the night just right and the board glows a color she cannot forget, the call connects after midnight and after the end of a song and after the last note of a life that learned to close drawers. It connects after the funeral and after the casseroles and after the number has technically stopped being anyone's. The call connects, and a river breathes, and a laugh leans into the wire, and a word that matters knows the way